Why does America need a Space National Guard? Now, this popped up, I guess, about last month when former President Trump spoke at the 146th National Guard Association meeting in Detroit, Michigan. And, of course, the joke started immediately afterwards. But, no matter who gets elected in November, a Space National Guard might not be a bad idea. You know what else isn't a bad idea? Ground news. I only endorse stuff that I personally use. I'm shooting this on Monday, October 14th. And Ground News has a lot of good stories today, but I was really interested in this one about Starship. But my subscription was over. I've been reading Ground News for over a year, and they've been a sponsor for a little under a year. So I immediately got a new subscription. That's how important Ground News is to me. When I realized my subscription was up, I immediately renewed. They do not give it to me for free. Ground News is a news aggregator showing the left, center, and right biases of a story. It also shows the factuality rating and who owns the actual media company. That way you know who's telling you what to think and the accuracy rating of those articles. So you can find stories you may have missed due to your own political biases. Look, I read Ground News every single day while I'm lying in bed in my bathrobe. It is part of my morning routine. So go to ground.news/ryanmcbeth to get 40% off the Vantage plan, which is the same plan that I just renewed. We can all stay informed together. Now, the Space Force was created on December 20th, 2019, and it falls under the Department of the Air Force the same way the Marine Corps is part of the Department of the Navy. And it was done because the fact is that there are acute threats from near-peer states that are actively denying the use of space. If we are serious about defending the ultimate high ground and ensuring the responsible use of space, it is important to us to have a branch that is dedicated to protecting and providing those capabilities. So, why a Space National Guard as opposed to a Federal Space Reserve Force? Well, first off, a bit about America's somewhat eclectic reserve system. The American military is broken into active duty, individual ready reserve, the reserves, and National Guard components. Active duty soldiers go to work every day as soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, or Space Force Guardians. When they leave the military, they serve another 4 years in the IRR, or Individual Ready Reserve. Usually, this just means they're required to keep the military notified of their addresses, they attend yearly musters, and you can be called back to active duty on an individual basis if the military needs your particular skill set. Now, the Army Reserves are a little bit different. There is an Army Reserve, a Navy Reserve, an Air Force Reserve, and a Marine Corps Reserve. These troops typically serve part-time, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. You can join the reserves directly, although most people join the reserves after their time of active duty comes to an end, and this becomes a win-win for everybody. The servicemen get pay and benefits, and the Army gets to see these servicemen keep their skills fresh in case they ever need them. Reservists serve in units that are typically deployed when the military needs that specific or particular capability. A good example is the Army job of 88 Uniform Railway Specialist. If the Army ever needs to move a heck of a lot of equipment by rail, they will activate the 757th Reserve Expeditionary Rail Center. Now, the National Guard is a little bit different. These units go all the way back to the formation of Colonial Militias, when every able-bodied man was expected to keep a musket and lead shot in their house. And if their town was attacked by the French or the Indians or later the British, they would assemble in the town square and go march off to fight. But that militia system was actually kept around after the American Revolution because the Founding Fathers were deathly afraid of large standing armies. They did not want to give what could potentially be a king or a tyrant a large standing army to work with. So every state got to keep its own army in the form of a state militia, and the U.S. got by with a very small standing army that fluctuated between like 6,000 and 30,000 soldiers in between the Revolutionary War and the American Civil War. And the commander-in-chief of that state militia was the governor of that state. Now, during the American Civil War, many units on both sides were state militia, and this resulted in extreme variations of weapons, cannon, uniforms, ammunition, equipment. A unit from Pennsylvania, their ammunition might not be compatible with a unit from Vermont, and so on. And you can see why this would be a problem. The Militia Act of 1903, also known as the Dick Act, attempted to fix this problem by codifying the circumstances in which the federal government could activate these militia units for federal service. It also released federal money to the states to provide standardized uniforms and equipment, and allowed for summer encampments and drill. Now, this paid off during World War I, when the National Guard was deployed overseas under a unified federal command. Now, like the reserves, you can join the National Guard directly, or you do it after you leave active duty. You serve part-time, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, although you may attend classes or schools as an additional duty. There are also some National Guard units that serve full-time in roles such as air defenders, or roles like the National Guard Civil Support Team, which provides support to civil authorities for domestic, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear emergencies. But for the most part, it's a part-time state-run force that can be activated for state missions or activated by the federal government for federal missions. And if there's ever a natural disaster, such as a hurricane or a flood, and the state needs the extra manpower, the governor can activate the National Guard. Now, one unique feature is that the National Guard can carry weapons in support of law enforcement. And this is something the Federal Army is not allowed to do, except in very specific and extreme circumstances. So I'm sure at this point you can see the benefit in some kind of Space Force reserve component. About 60 to 70% of servicemen who were on active duty choose to either join the reserves or the National Guard when they leave active duty. But if you just left the Space Force, you have no reserve component to join that could use your skills. Now, you might be able to find a similar job in the Air Force Reserves or the Air Guard, but it might not be exactly the same job, and that's the problem. We're spending so much money developing personnel with space capabilities only to throw them away at the end of their contract. What the heck is with that? So creating some form of Space Force Reserve wouldn't be a bad idea, but why would a Space National Guard that is under control of the state governors be a better idea? Well, it all goes back to the All-Domain Common Operating Picture, or ADCOP. The military does not fight in a vacuum. Joint operations are highly necessary to fight and win on the modern battlefield. You don't just need to know the situation on the ground, you also need to know the operational picture in cyberspace, the information war, and in space. And you know how the Army has brigades and the Air Force has wings? Well, the Space Force has deltas. Space Delta 7 is headquartered at Peterson Space Force Base and deals with ISR, or Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance. They will actually send out detachments to other Space Force Deltas and to other branches like the Army to act as the liaison to space. If a commander on the ground needs some sort of space asset, the liaison from Space Delta 7 can communicate that need to the CSPOC, or Combined Space Operations Center. So how can the National Guard use this asset? Well, let's say the National Guard is in California and they're activated to fight a wildfire. They might use their Space National Guard asset that's in their state to interface with the CSPOC to get satellite footage on where that fire is going. Or let's say an airplane crashes in the woods and the state police are called out to search the wreckage. That Space National Guard liaison can work with the CSPOC and the state police to track satellites so that the wreckage could be found and aid in recovery. And that state guard unit, when they get deployed, they already have their Space Force liaison with them. They've trained and worked with these people for years, so they know each other and they trust each other. That is an excellent feature of the National Guard. A lot of these people work with each other for years. So creating a Space National Guard has plenty of advantages that can be utilized at the state and local level. And it's probably not a bad idea to create one no matter who wins in November. And hey, if you want to watch my video on why America needs a Space Force, you can find that below. And if you want to support the channel, grab one of my t-shirts from Bunker Branding. This is a Department of the Boat People shirt. It all goes to support content like this. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Oh, wow, Daddy's cigarettes. If I smoke these, I'll be cool.
Hey kid, what are you doing?
Think tank.
You know kid, smoking isn't cool, but t-shirts, stickers, and hoodies from Bunker Branding sure are.
Wow, alcoholics moving cargo. Awesome.
Intel Life, Aerosol, Live, Laugh, Launch for Destroyer, Trident, HIMARS, and Patriot. Think outside the bomb. Drone Suite Drone. Department of the Boat People. Landmines, and even the tow missile. It would behoove you to grab one today.
I better take these. Don't worry, I'll destroy them by burning. And remember, bunker branding is cool. Now I know. And knowing is half the battle.
Bunker branding!